Now, the Morning Majority on 630. WMAS.
8:07 on the Morning Majority. Good Friday morning to you. It's Brian Neiman, Joe DeGenova in the house this morning. We do have Deborah Burlingame coming up at 8:36 this morning. Pleased to be joined now by Del Wilber, author of the book Rawhide Down, The Near Assassination of Ronald Reagan. Morning, Del. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
March 30th, 1981 was the day. Before we get into that, what gave you the idea to write this book?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story, and I think it's great that we're talking about presidential courage today. And there's never been a day in U.S. history where we got such an unvarnished look at a president and the courage he displayed as March 30th, 1981. The book idea came, I'm not a presidential historian.
Mm-hmm.
My publicist would kill me if she heard me say that. I cover the federal courthouse.
You are now, whether you like it or not.
I cover the federal courthouse for the Washington Post. And I was covering some hearings involving John Hinckley. As we know, he was found not guilty by reason of insanity.
Right.
And every few years he gets before the court to ask for more freedom, more privileges from St. Elizabeth's Hospital where he's been held. And I covered this hearing. It was kind of interesting. I wrote my story, moved on. And a few days later, I get a call from the Washington field office of the FBI. And Joseph Persichini, the head of the Washington field office at the time, wanted to talk to me. Because they had heard I knew about an undercover investigation involving Ethiopian taxi cab drivers in a bribery scandal. And I was like, okay, interesting, but I get called over and they said, you can't write this story. If you write this story, you'll wreck our case. You got to stop. I said, okay, well, as a reporter, you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm going to keep looking. I can't stop, whatever. He gets up from the conference table. He walks to his desk. I hear him rummaging through a drawer. He comes back and slaps something so heavy in my hand. And I look down. And it's a gun. I went, whoa, this is like a new level of intimidation, okay? It's right? You're like, he goes, that's Hinckley's gun. I went, whoa. What's Hinckley's gun doing in a desk drawer? Right. Isn't it like an artifact of history?
Sure, right.
This gun almost killed the most revered Republican president since Teddy Roosevelt. So I went to the library. Now I'm intrigued, right? I'm not a dummy. I may not be the smartest guy in the world, but I'm not stupid, okay? I got hit down by fate twice in a week. Like, Hinckley hearing, gun in hand. Someone's trying to tell me something. So I went to the library, couldn't find a single book on the day. There's one on the trial and one on the 25th Amendment academic book. And that's what kind of launched it. Next thing you know, I'm calling Jerry Parr. He's the agent. If you look at the book jacket, there's a great picture of an agent shoving Reagan into a car. And that agent's Jerry Parr. And I said, if I'm going to write this book, I need Jerry Parr. And so I called Jerry Parr, but I didn't actually expect Jerry Parr to talk to me because he's in the Secret Service, and they're, quote, secret for a reason.
He's still in the Secret Service?
No, he's long retired. But it doesn't matter.
Right.
They have this code. It's like, the code of silence from whatever movie we've seen. They don't talk. And they're secret. Jeez, man. He's like, I'd like to talk to you. I'm thinking about doing something. I don't know. And he's, meet me for a roast beef sandwich. Great. So we met him for a roast beef sandwich at old Croupen's Deli up here, or I think it's Murray's now. And over 2 hours, he spun out a story. And I was like, wow. More than 125 interviews later of many, many people and reviewing 10,000 pages of documents and everything, I felt like I came pretty close to being able to definitively tell the story of probably one of the most dramatic days in U.S. presidential history, at least in the last 30 years, and certainly longer than that.
All right, well, let's get into that day. What was Reagan doing at the Hilton anyway? What was the speech about?
That's a great question. This was an ordinary day for the president. And I had a lot of people keep asking me about what surprised you in researching the book and stuff like that. And one thing that surprised me is Reagan's going to give this routine speech to the AFL-CIO at the Washington Hilton Hotel. Okay. We all seen the Washington Hilton Hotel. Yeah. He rewrote that speech by hand. He did that all the time. And I didn't realize, your kind of perception of Ronald Reagan is, he kind of read a script, but, not a script. And so he rewrites the speech. He delivers the speech, not the best address he's ever given, to the AFL-CIO, and he leaves the Hilton. The Hilton was built in the 1950s, and they wanted to draw the President of the United States to this place, right? International ballroom, awesome hotel. They built a VIP entrance for the president, just for the president. But they didn't consult the Secret Service on the driveway, okay? From the main entrance on T Street, past the VIP entrance to Connecticut Avenue, too windy. Limousine might get stuck on there if there's a crisis.
Right.
They couldn't pick him up at the door. They could drop him off, and they backed it up 25 feet. Reagan's leaving the Hilton. It's precisely 2:27 p.m. Cloudy, gray day, kind of gross, a little warmer than average. Reagan's walking out of the Hilton towards his waiting limousine, 25 feet away. Off his left shoulder is Jerry Parr, the agent. Jerry Parr's 50 years old, head of the White House detail. He wasn't even supposed to be there that day. Jerry Parr tapped another agent and said, I want to take the shift because I want to get to know the president better. They're walking. A rope line 15 feet from the open limousine door. Behind that rope line, reporters, union officials, and John W. Hinckley Jr. In his right-hand pocket is a .22 caliber revolver. They get near the limousine. 15 feet from the president, John Hinckley pulls out the gun and unleashes 6 shots in 1.7 seconds.
Wow.
1.7 seconds is the time it takes me to say 1.7 seconds.
Right.
The first shot hits James Brady, the press secretary. He falls to the ground. The second shot hits Tom Delahanty, a D.C. police officer. He falls to the ground. The way to Reagan should be clear. But Jerry Parr's already reacting. Before he can even process that it was the sound of gunfire, he's roughly, by the way, grabbed the 70-year-old president of the United States and thrust him towards that open limousine door. The third shot goes high. Am I surprised he missed on that third shot? Not really, because Hinckley took a ton of target practice in his life, but only at stationary targets. He misses. Jerry Parr gets him to miss. They're heading toward the limousine. Tim McCarthy, a Secret Service agent, swivels, not wearing a bulletproof vest, takes a shot in the chest, spins to the ground. That bullet stopped him from hitting Reagan, too. Fly behind the bulletproof window of the limousine. They're behind the bulletproof door. The fifth shot hits the bulletproof window, and the bullet disintegrates. They flash behind that. The sixth shot cracks across the driveway. At that moment, no one knows where that sixth shot went. In reality, later they'd realize, hit the side of the limousine, ricocheted through a gap about 1.5 inches wide between the door and the doorframe, and struck Reagan 5 inches below the left armpit. They land in a tumble in the limousine. The door shuts. You guys have seen presidential motorcades many times, right? Imagine this scene. The limousine pulls away. Jerry Parr looks out the window and sees 3 men on the cement, a bullet mark in the window of the limousine, and he knows there's been an assassination attempt, and that limousinelimousine's alone. They left everyone else behind. They're tearing down Connecticut Avenue towards the White House, and that limousine is alone. And think about that. I mean, you can't go anywhere in this city and not get stuck for 20 minutes when the presidential motorcade comes by. And they fled that scene so fast, they're driving. The limousine driver barely misses a patrol car. They're heading down Connecticut Avenue. A woman in a stroller pushes her dog, is pushing a stroller across the street. He swerves and barely misses that, and they're alone. Jerry Parr checks out the president. The president seems like he's okay. Rubs his hands up and down his shirt through his hair looking for blood, doesn't see any. And Jerry Parr then gets on the radio and says, "Rawhide is okay. Rawhide is okay."
Really?
That's where I got the title of the book, Rawhide, down. Rawhide was Reagan's Secret Service code name. They're heading back to the White House. 30 to 40 seconds later, they realize the story has changed. They're not safe. Reagan, bright frothy blood in his lips. He's complaining of pain in his chest. His face color is going ashen. Parr has a decision to make. That bright frothy blood is a big problem. It means it's probably from the lungs. Maybe he broke a rib and it punctured Reagan's lung. What does he do?
He thinks maybe he hurt himself throwing it in the car, right?
And no one knows that Reagan has been shot. Reagan doesn't know he's been shot. He thought maybe he broke a rib.
Right.
And so what do? You go to the White House. They have a medical team there. This could be like a decapitation strike, World War III. This is the height of the Cold War, right? We're not kidding around.
Right.
That limousine is alone, by the way. They're just getting the motorcade assembled again behind them. The driver looks in his rearview mirror and sees the follow-up car, the armored follow-up car, and 2 agents are hanging on the running boards, brandishing Uzis.
Oh, my gosh.
Tearing off down Connecticut Avenue, head to the White House. And Jerry Parr makes the decision. His training says that bright, frothy blood's a problem. I can go to the hospital where there's absolutely no security. I can go to the safest place in the known universe, the White House. He chooses the hospital.
I'll stop you there, and we'll continue in a second. A great story. You're a great storyteller. I'm on the edge of my seat right now. Del Wilber, author of the book Rawhide Down, the Near Assassination of Ronald Reagan. We'll pick it up with the decision, which is, I guess, to go to the hospital. We'll find out. 8:15 on WMAL. Traffic and weather together every 10 minutes, first in the fives, and here's Steve Herschel.
And brought to you by Kaiser Permanente. Connecticut Avenue, Chevy Chase Circle, right at the Circle. Watch for an accident between Montgomery County and Northwest Washington right now. Connecticut Avenue, Chevy Chase Circle, that causes backups in all directions very quickly when that happens, so that's what's going on there. Route 118 in Germantown between Crystal Rock Drive and Wisteria Drive is now reopened. The earlier accident investigation cleared from the roadway. Middlebrook Road also reopened now, so better news there after several hours of that closure. Route 118 now open. 66 eastbound delays in Manassas, again through Centerville from 50 to 123 and briefly at the Beltway after that. Outer loop of the Beltway after Springfield before Telegraph Road, you're going to slow down, and the inner loop is slow from Braddock Road up to 236 from 50 to 66. After that, your lanes there also open. 395 delays leaving the Beltway up to King Street, unfortunately most of the way now. That's really getting heavy. And then from the Pentagon across the 14th Street Bridge, if you're heading north on the Fairfax County Parkway, you're in delays now between Route 29 and Fair Lakes Parkway. Play. It does what no pill, no procedure can to keep you young. Kaiser Permanente reminds you to make it part of your day. Learn more at kp.org/thrive. Kaiser Foundation Health Plan of the Mid-Atlantic States Incorporated, 2101 East Jefferson Street, Rockville, MD 20852. Now the 6:30 WMAL Weather Channel forecast.
Mix of clouds, sun this morning, and then maybe some rain this afternoon. High near 70, low of 51 tonight. Sunshine tomorrow, a high of 72. Maybe some rain for Mother's Day Sunday, and a high about 68. It's 48 right now at Reagan National. Headed up to 70 today. WMAL News Time 8:17. Brian Neiman, Joe DeGenova in the studio this morning with us. Del Wilber as well, author of the book Rawhide Down, the near assassination of Ronald Reagan. Telling the unbelievable story about that day on March 30th, 1981. Before we pick it up where they're going to the hospital instead of the White House, I do want to ask you, you said he got off 6 shots in 1.7 seconds?
Yes.
1.7 seconds. What kind of gun is that?
It was a 22 caliber revolver, snub nose, tiny little gun. If you look in the book jacket, there should be a picture of it somewhere. I mean, in the book. If you get the book, you'll see a picture of it. Maybe even on rawhidedown.com's website. It fits in the palm of your hand. It's a tiny little gun, but it's just a revolver. Click, 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 click. You're done.
And Hinckley was out there at the range practicing for this?
Oh, he practiced all the time.
And how did he know that Reagan was going to be there?
Oh, that's a great story. So Hinckley is obsessed with the movie actress Jodie Foster.
Right.
We all know that story, right? Well, he's on his way from L.A., where he's failed to sell his music. He wants to be a songwriter like his idol, John Lennon, even though he actually identifies more with Lennon's assassin, Mark Chapman.
Right.
Not the most sane guy,
Right,
okay?
right.
He's leaving from L.A. to go to New Haven, where he's finally going to kill himself, kill Jodie Foster, or kill both of them in an orgy of violence. And he stops through D.C. And that morning, March 30th, 1981, he was eating, after he ate an Egg McMuffin sandwich, he went and picked up the Washington Star newspaper, turned to page A4, and saw the president's schedule. And said, I'm going to go up to the Hilton to see what I can do. Now, he had always been obsessed with the president, and he had stalked Carter and got within arm's reach of Carter in the 1980 campaign, but left his guns at the bus depot and didn't bring them with him. He had stalked Reagan during the transition. And so he had thought about if he killed the president, if he shot the president, he would gain her affection.
No.
So that's where he is. So now the limousine, right? Heading back to the White House.
Right.
It diverts the hospital. Jerry Parr makes that split-second decision.
Going to GW,
Yes,
I imagine?
GW.
Yeah.
GW Hospital off Pennsylvania Avenue. So they've taken off down Connecticut to 17th, hard pivot onto Pennsylvania towards the hospital. And I like to say Reagan's life on this day hung in the balance of a split-second decision, and a mere inch. And when I say that, if Jerry Parr is a split-second slower getting Reagan in that limousine, the bullet hits Reagan in the head. Split-second decision, going to the hospital is going to prove very important. They get to the hospital in 3 minutes. That's how fast they got there. Reagan insists on walking inside. He's the president. He's a cowboy, right? Gets inside, walks in 15 feet, collapses like a dead weight into these agents. His eyes rolled in the back of his head. I interviewed a paramedic who was there and saw it happen. The paramedic said, Del, I thought the president was Code City, meaning he's going to die.
Yep.
They're carrying him to the trauma bay, throw him on the gurney. A nurse is going, please don't die, please don't die, please don't die, please don't die. Another nurse is strapped on the blood pressure cuff. She can barely work because she's crying. She's crying. She's having flashbacks to 1963 when she saw her father cry for the one time in his life, when he was watching the Kennedy assassination footage. She's working. She can't get a blood pressure. They can't detect his blood pressure. It's that low. He is in that much trouble. Another technician, but they're doing their jobs. They're working hard. This other technician threads a 3-foot-long IV line from his right arm all the way to his heart to flood fluids and monitor stuff very quickly. She looks up. Wait a minute. What are all these guys with guns and stuff in suits? And looks down, sees Reagan. Oh, my God. Turns around, gets smelling salts off the shelf, sniffs them, shocks herself back into submission.
For herself, right?
Herself, and gets back to work. They work furiously. They eventually find the bullet hole, and it's a tiny slit. Imagine getting shot by a dime. It's the shape of a dime. Imagine getting shot by a dime edgewise, that little slit that would be created.
Right.
And it hits him in there, hits a rib, tumbles, starts chumbling end over end, chewing up arteries and tissue. And they eventually see this, but they don't know that because he's barely bleeding out of his body. And they discover it's all internal bleeding, which is a big problem.
Yeah.
They insert a chest tube. They drain the blood. It won't stop. Reagan would lose more than half his blood this day. Remember, he's 70 years old, and this is only the 70th day of his presidency. 70, losing more than half his blood. In fact, I had a trauma doctor run the calculations for me. Someone who's 70, whose blood pressure was 60 when they first detected it, and who'd been shot. The chance of survival, less than 50%. So they're doing all this. They take him to surgery, and you know, there's this moment when you're a reporter where you realize you have something good. Right? And my moment came when I interviewed Dr. David Adelberg. Dr. David Adelberg was a 31-year-old surgical intern on this day. Just 31. He's a nobody in medicine. A nobody. He was waking up to do a gallbladder surgery. Somehow he gets on Ben Aaron, the head surgeon's team, to find the bullet and stop the bleeding. Ben Aaron, while he's inside Reagan's chest looking for this piece of shrapnel and can't find it, and is panicking. Well, he's not really panicking, but he's nervous that the bullet may slip into an artery and shoot up to Reagan's brain and kill him. He has to find that bullet. Dr. David Adelberg, 31-year-old surgical intern, reaches his hand inside Reagan's chest, gently cups the president's beating heart in his hand, and nestles it aside. This room is surrounded by Secret Service agents armed to the teeth, ready to pounce at the slightest movement, and Dr. David Adelberg is holding the life of Ronald Reagan in his hand. When I heard that, I knew, oh my God, this is a hell of a story. And
You're literally holding his heart.
Holding his heart to give the other surgeon more room. He felt pulsating. It was the most galvanizing moment of his life. And so, and like what I said, a split second decision, a mere inch. Split second, Jerry Parr's a split second slower, Reagan dies. If he makes the decision to go to the White House, that split second decision to go to the White House instead of the hospital, he goes to the hospital instead. If he goes to the White House, Ronald Reagan's dead. Doctors are emphatic. I was on a panel with the top trauma surgeon at Shock Trauma, one of the top ones there the other day. Said, no, Ronald Reagan would have died. There was no time. He lost too much blood too quickly. And an inch, that's where the bullet lodged next to Reagan's heart. That's where they found it, just an inch away. So I think it's fair to say, what would this have meant to the world? And we're talking about presidential courage earlier. Right. And I like telling a couple of Ronald Reagan stories, if I may.
Sure.
Ronald Reagan sees his wife come into the ER. He's been shot. He has a painful chest tube bored through 2 ribs in his chest to drain the blood. People are scurrying around like crazy. He looks up and sees his wife, Nancy, the love of his life, and says, honey, I forgot to duck. Right. Then he's getting wheeled to surgery. Emergency surgery, mind you. And he sees his 3 top advisors. Who's minding the story, he says. Then he's on the operating table. He looks up and sees the doctors. He gets up dramatically on one elbow, takes the oxygen mask off his face, and says, I hope you're all Republicans. Lies back down. The American people heard this. Ronald Reagan heard these words that day. Lynn Noftinger, one of his top aides, delivered them. Ronald Reagan had one of the most scripted presidencies in U.S. history. And that's not a negative. Ronald Reagan, he liked it that way. He was smart. Like I said, he rewrote the speech. He didn't care if he got credit for stuff. He had, in fact, a plaque that said, there's no limit to what a man can achieve if he doesn't care who gets the credit on his desk. He meant it. Right? He was a smart guy. Anyway, so Reagan, people hear this. But I think it's hard to get to know who a president really is when it's all scripted all the time on the campaign. Is he really funny? Is that stuff written for him? Is he really brave? Well, we don't know, right? Because he had that image of a cowboy, right? Rawhide. Well, on this day, the script got thrown out at 2:27 p.m., and we saw who he really was. He's a guy who laughed in the face of death. He's a guy who cracked a joke to his wife to calm her down because he was more worried about her than himself. And we like that. Yeah. The American people like that. 5 days earlier than this, March 30th, 5 days before that, he had the lowest approval rating of any president in U.S. presidential history, that early in their first term. After this, approval rating skyrocketed. He got so much stuff done. And so, that's what we learned about Ronald Reagan.
You are a great storyteller, and really riveting to listen to you. And
it's a great book. People should buy it. It is an amazing book.
Del Wilber, and the book is called Rawhide Down, The Near Assassination of Ronald Reagan. Thanks for coming in this morning, and thanks for writing the book.
I think, Joe, it meant a lot that you know the case pretty well, so thank you. It meant a lot that you think that.
You bet. It's a great book. People should buy it. Get multiple copies. Give it to friends.